have a duo, and I'm going to leave it up to them to decide how they do their act. But as they come up, we have Brian Day and Dr. David Jacobs from the Co-Benefits team. The Co-Benefits team has been doing impressive work in broader socio-economic development analysis, as well as work with the Mpumalanga community and stakeholders to try to find answers to what the future of Mpumalanga might look like as the just transition unfolds. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Honorable Premier, dear Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to be here to be able to present some results of a study which we have executed last year on very specific elements of the energy transition in Mpumalanga. That is the potential of job creation from now until 2030, the potential of creating a regional clean energy industry in Mpumalanga, and then also the potential of improving the conditions for women for having a more gender-inclusive energy transition in the region and in South Africa as a whole. Before I get started, I would like to start with a round of thanks. First of all, to the Mpumalanga provincial government and the Green Cluster, especially, who's been very crucial in this work, in really giving us guidance on what elements to analyze, which aspects really need detailed analysis. So to Nati and his team, big thanks for this guidance as part of the COBENEFITS Council. I'd also like to thank the International Climate Initiative from the German Ministry of Environment, which was funding this work for the last 5 years with various studies on socio-economic effects in South Africa, which I will present to you shortly. And last but not least, of course, also big thanks to all of the research institutes and all of the consulting firms from South Africa, because you have to know that all of the work that we have done under the umbrella of the benefits project was done by South African researchers. So this project has been led by CSIR, and therefore Brian Day will present some of the more detailed findings after my short introduction. So before we go zoom into Mpumalanga, I still want to take 2 minutes just to focus on the global picture, even though the Premier has already given us some very important insights on climate change as it currently happening. I think it's always worth reminding us about the situation that we currently have. So as we speak, we see large parts of Siberia burning without anyone being there to eliminate the fires because the military is currently busy with someone else. As we speak, we have record heats in Northern Africa, about almost to 50 degrees Celsius. As we speak, we see substantial flooding in Pakistan and India, with 2 million people fleeing these areas because they can no longer stay there. Just following extensive weeks of heat in India, where there were reports not only of human beings suffering immensely, but just of birds falling from the sky because they no longer had water to drink from for several weeks. And this is the kind of dire situation we live in already today in a world that's just 1 degree warmer on average. And we're heading towards a world which is going to be 3 or 4 degrees warmer. And we don't really want to imagine how this is going to look like in the future. So we are the kind of last generation who can really make a difference. We should always keep this in mind, whatever we discuss here, that this is kind of our human responsibility as this generation who has still the ability to make changes for the next 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years of human beings living on this planet. Now, what does it mean? It means we have to dramatically change our way of life, our whole economy, and of course, the entire energy sector in just a few decades. So we're really talking about 1, 2, 3 decades that we have time to transform our entire economy. And even though some countries have already taken a few steps, we are all in this together, that this is really something new that we have to face. I just want to give you a few examples. In Germany, we were tapping on our shoulders for the last decade because we're deploying around 2 gigawatts of solar PV every year. Now, the new government came in and said, okay, what does it actually look like when we want to decarbonize our economy by 2045? So they changed from 2050 to 2045. It means that we have to deploy not 2 gigawatts of solar PV every year, but 20 gigawatts every year until 2030. And in addition to that, another 8 to 10 gigawatts of wind energy every year. So by 2030, in order to get to a net zero electricity system by that year, we need to deploy around 250 gigawatts of renewable energies. And this is the scale of change we're talking about. We're not talking about slight adjustments to what we're doing, slight adjustments to business usual. We're talking about dramatic changes that we need to put in place in order to still have a planet which is inhabitable for humans and other beings in the future. Now, that sounds very dramatic, and I think it is, but I think there's also a lot of hope in this. And net zero strategies, as we see them now being adopted in more than 70 countries around the world, with the International Energy Agency also laying out how a net zero global energy system could look like by 2050, that's actually not just a threat, it's actually a big security, because we know where we're going. And when we know where we're going, because as Sasso has said, we develop a plan to decarbonize until 2050. ESCOM is also making internal plans to have a decarbonization strategy. These strategies are very important because you have a clear strategy, and therefore you can anticipate opportunities and you can anticipate risks. If you're just mumbling around and saying, well, all opportunities are still on the table, then you have very huge difficulties for making any long-term planning and for also assuring that the people currently working in coal and in oil and gas in South Africa can also have a vision for their future. So I would really like to stress that developing a net zero strategy is actually a key component of providing hope to the workers that are currently working in the coal industry. And I would like to quote Nelson Mandela here, even though he was not referring to the energy transition when he was saying it, but he was saying, may your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. And then I think this might be a good mantra for the energy transition in South Africa, that you really ask yourself every time, am I driven here by my fears of losing something, or am I actually driven by my hopes? And this is where we all come in the co-benefit project. So we're kind of in the hope business. We're not talking about any naive hopes of the future that everything will be okay somehow, but we're kind of talking about planned hopes, because we can plan ahead how the electricity system, how the energy system will develop, and therefore also anticipate what kind of measures are needed to mitigate some of the risks of workers in the coal, but also to seize the opportunities in renewable energies and other clean energy technologies. Now, one of the crucial elements of this co-benefit project was the co-benefit council. And as I already mentioned, the Mpumalanga provincial government was part of this, but also representatives from the other national departments, Department of Energy, as it was called, before we started, Energy and Mining, the Department of Environmental Affairs, DEF now, the Treasury, all of them, Saga, IPP office, all of them came together and were really telling us which kind of analysis we should execute in terms of socio-economic impacts of the energy transition in Mpumalanga. So we were trying to shift the perspective and the narrative from burden sharing, as it was discussed, especially between 2000 and 2010 internationally as well, to opportunity sharing. So what kind of opportunities are actually emerging by South Africa moving into clean energy technologies and renewable energies. And we've done this, first of all, at the national level in the first phase of the project from 2017 to 2019, analyzing a variety of aspects, all the term until 2050. So what is the impact on electricity consumers, How much money can they save when they do self-consumption of solar PV on the rooftops? What is the impact on marginalized communities when they profit from the ED and SED spending, which is currently part of the IPP projects? Also improved health and reduced health system costs by phasing out coal and replacing it with renewables. And last but not least, also a very important study on employment. So this study was published back in 2019, already highlighting that South Africa as a whole will create more jobs in the clean energy sector, substantially more jobs in the clean energy sector, than it will lose in the fossil fuel industry. And this, of course, also resonates with a lot of the international analysis. So when you look at the studies from IRENA, they also show similar trends. Now, we got some criticism for that because there was a lot of people were saying, well, that's interesting for South Africa as a whole, but what is actually the impact for coal regions like Mpumalanga? This is why we had shifted our focus in the next phase of the project. And this was why we had initiated a study together with the Mpumalanga provincial government to really look into the shorter term effects of rolling out renewables in different scenarios in Mpumalanga and what kind of effects this has on the regional economy. And this is the study that Brian Day will present to you in more detail in 1 minute. I just wanted to highlight the key findings. And I think they're very important for all of the people here who are in the hope business. Let me put it this way. So, first of all, the analysis has shown that by deploying large amounts of renewables, also for hydrogen production, we can actually compensate almost all of the job losses in the fossil fuel industry. That is in coal-fired power stations and also in coal mining until 2030. So very positive results here in terms of potential for job creation. And then, of course, we also need to talk about reskilling. Second major finding is that with the necessary policy interventions, we can make Mpumalanga the clean energy hub of the future. So as it is currently the clean energy hub for coal, the energy hub for coal, it can also become the clean energy hub in the future. And this, of course, requires industry policies like Andrew already mentioned before, having some special economic zones and other industry policy interventions which will allow for this to happen. And of course, a lot more deployment of renewable energies needs to take place in the province and not just in other parts of Zimbabwe. And last but not least, the third finding was that by making this transition towards renewable energies, we can also improve the situation for women by having more women being employed normally in the renewable energy sector than in the coal or coal mining sector. And therefore also based on very specific policy interventions and support also for women in the sector and creating networks, we can actually also at the same time as managing the energy transition, creating a more gender-inclusive economy. So this was just my 10-minute introduction, and now I would like to hand over to Brian, who actually has a real hardcore findings as representatives of the CSIR, who was actually leading this study.
I guess the mask emphasizes my South Africanness, which I'm passionate about. It's a huge privilege to be here with you today. Honourable Premier, Executive Mayor, MECs, Minister from the EU, the Danish Ambassador, and all the other dignitaries from both the international and the local contingent in both the private and the public sectors. My name is Brian Day, and the last slide of our presentation you will see the organizations that were represented on this program. I was privileged to be part of the INATROG delegation who, together with Navitas and the CSIR and Prime Africa, executed the work for the study. Special mention to the researchers who were involved, one of whom is here today, Ruan Puri, others, Olivia Mpumalanga and Deneo Makate. Thank you so much for the privilege of working with you. David has shown the good news of the national positives of jobs growth in the transition to renewable energy. The reality, though, and it's a stark reality, is that Mpumalanga stands to lose the most in this transition, because the benefits are dispersed, but the losses are localized. And that was the realization of the co-benefits team leading up to this last portion, where I was fortunate enough to get involved. So the objective of this part of the co-benefits work was to quantify the socio-economic benefits of renewable energy facilities that are replacing coal-fired power plants in Mpumalanga, namely the employment effects, the industrialization opportunities, and skills development and gender opportunities. You'll see on the next slide the three main aspects of the research and some of the specifics around modeling work that was done based on the IJERA model, where the output was quantitative analysis of these employment effects. On the industrialization question, we produced a value chain for the coal and RE industries. We quantify the value creation from RE using the IJERA model, and it was to establish opportunities for value creation and localization. Under skills requirements and gender considerations, we use skills data and gender balances from the relevant parties, especially Eskom and the Mining Qualifications Authority. And a huge thank you to Mandy and her team at Eskom, as well as by the Minerals Council, thank you Henk, and the Mining Qualifications Authority, real-world data that was used to confirm the findings of the IJERA model. The model is only as good as its validation, and we were able to get a very good correlation between the modeled numbers and the verified numbers from the organizations. We executed interviews with experts to assess RE skills requirements and analyzed skills transferability. Andre de Ruyter spoke about it, the training center at Komati, understanding the qualifications, the current skills, and especially the assessment of informal skills, more so in the mining sector, even than in the Eskom power generation sector. We need to acknowledge skills and do a deeper dive into how to utilize these skills in the renewables transition. We then looked at issues around women participation in the renewables sector, and we'll give you some insights into the findings. This gives you a snapshot of the scenarios that we looked at. The base case is obviously the RP 2019. We do understand that it's late in development, it's been mentioned already before now, and I think as a country, one of the biggest imperatives is to build new capacity more quickly than we've been able to up to now. Scenario 2 was an accelerated scenario. Scenario 3 looked at previous mining-owned land to accelerate even more construction of renewable facilities. And scenario 4 looked at the same level of decommissioning, but significantly more renewables feeding a hydrogen value chain. And you heard Victor from Sasol and all of the plans that are being made in this regard by them and others. This is probably one of the most difficult slides and one of the most important. In order to do modeling, one has to have few enough variables before you can get to a point of doing the modeling. Very often it requires assumptions to be made which form boundary conditions to that model. The classic case is the RRP, where a certain electricity availability factor is assumed. Unfortunately, the reality is that that EAF, electricity availability factor, is significantly lower in reality, and therefore significantly more new generation capacity is needed. This slide is one of those slides. And we've emphasized it in our findings, in our discussions with TIPS, the NBI, and other organizations who are doing similar modeling to this. We needed to understand the potential proportion of renewables built in Mpumalanga. The context here, though, is important. Understanding the proportion or the number of renewable plants that have been built in Mpumalanga to date. And I think it's a heartache for the Premier that in wind and solar projects in Mpumalanga to date, there's a big fat zero. There's one biomass project in Botswana, farther to the east, but even the preferred bidders of Window 5 do not yet include any wind or PV projects in Mpumalanga. So this is a slide that we need to work hard to make happen. It's not the default situation. And that's the difference between the status quo and decisive leadership. You'll hear after lunch from some of the developers who are active in Mpumalanga, the resource here is not as bad as most of us assumed it was. We know it's sunny in the Northern Cape. We know it's windy in the southern part, Southern Cape, east and west. But the resource penalty here is really not that bad. There are, in fact, some very good sites. In addition to that, we are closer to the load center. So the value of an electron generated here, 80 or 100 kilometers away from Gauteng, is in fact higher than the value of an electron produced in, for example, Uppington. We haven't yet managed to build that into the rules of the renewables program, and you'll see later that it's one of our recommendations. So we believe that it is possible that 15% of wind projects, proportional to the country in total, and 20% of PV projects could indeed be built in this wonderful province. I implore future research to validate, question, and engage with this assumption. It is absolutely critical as we move forward. Moving on then to the key findings of the work. The loss of coal-based jobs in Mpumalanga is high. In Eskom, in the coal mines, and in the related value chains. More so in the related value chains than even in the primary roles of Eskom and coal mining. And I think it's something that as renewables proponents, we need to just take stock and be willing to acknowledge. It's too easy to come up here and suggest that renewables is a panacea, it's an easy win, it can solve all your problems without the difficulties of the transition. The reality is that we've seen that renewables can play a profound role. That doesn't mean that it's easy. So you can see on the left-hand side for the different scenarios, the level of job losses, 74,000 job losses in scenario 1, increasing with more ambitious scenarios. That's Eskom, mining, and related. Andre de Ruyter also spoke about the importance of the local value chain, manufacturing in Mpumalanga, and we focused a lot on that in our work as well. It's important that Eskom and coal mining job losses were corroborated, a comment that I made earlier. And about 27% of the job losses are actually in the power stations and the mines, with the balance in the value chains. And it's especially in the value chains, where there is similar equipment that's required in PV and wind systems facilities than is required in power generation from coal or other sources. But that was the bad news. There's a whole lot of good news as well. Renewables replaces a significant proportion of coal-based jobs in Mpumalanga. On the assumption, remember, of between 15% wind and 20% PV facilities proportionate to the national being built in Mpumalanga. If we don't achieve that, it won't be a significant proportion, it will be some other proportion. If we manage to build more than that, there is even the opportunity to create more jobs than is lost in the coal value chain. So again, I'll point you back to the slide of the assumption, the boundary condition for the modeling, and again, I implore other research entities to question and engage further in that slide. But what it also means is that other industries also need to be prioritized in job creation and industrialization in Mpumalanga. Because we talk a lot about the current jobs being in jeopardy, but we've also got 30 or 40% of our people unemployed. So we need industrialization, we need economic development, we need people development for all our people. Not only the ones who are relatively privileged by being employed currently. Moving on then to the second main leg of the research, value creation and industrialization. A very big number of 340 billion rand in value creation between 2019 and 2030 at the higher levels of local content. Part of the sensitivities that we did, we looked at different levels of local content, and obviously we want to create an ongoing, sustainable renewables industry rather than some of the stop-start that we've had up to now, because only then do you actually develop the local manufacturing, the local business. Further developing businesses who are already manufacturing electricity generation-related goods in this coal belt of Mpumalanga, starting new businesses and really getting to the point of higher local content levels. The value creation with renewables can be 3 times higher than the value losses in the coal sector. Obviously, we've got to look at the value creation relative to jobs, and there's been discussions already around the type of jobs, the skills necessary. And Andre de Ruyter also spoke about the training center in Kumasi. That a lot of good work can be done. Moving on then to the skills requirements and gender. Madam Premier, I would bring you back to a comment you made in your speech. Skills requirements and gender form one of the 3 legs of the work that we did. Noma Kpase from the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, thank you for putting this on our agenda. We did a lot of work on this, but a lot more is still needed. Here you see some of the key findings. In terms of females employed, Eskom employs 29% of their staff are females. In coal mines, it's 21%. Of the females in Eskom, 67% have post-matric, whereas in mines, for males, it's 49%. Female unemployment rate, nationally it's 38%, slightly lower in Mpumalanga for the year 2019. And importantly, 8% higher unemployment for women with a minor child. That means our mothers often not by choice, are less employed than our women who are not mothers. It's a tragedy, and we need to make accommodations, basic accommodations. For example, if we're sending a woman for a training experience, can we accommodate her local child in that accommodation venue? Or is there just a single room available? Small things that can really bring in women into our industry. Looking then at challenges and opportunities. 3 challenges, 3 opportunities. A lot, if not most, renewable plants are in remote areas, which creates security risks for women. Some plants or some facilities in industry not even providing separate restrooms for women. Women engineers having to prove their capability because they are disbelieved as a point of departure. But there are also 3 opportunities. And this has come out directly from the interviews and the research that was done. As a new sector, there is a lower perception of renewables being a male-dominated industry compared to power generation and coal mining. We've got an opportunity to grasp that. I don't know that that's going to last forever. So the sooner we grasp that opportunity and teach our girl child the opportunities, the better. There's a gender diversity working group and other initiatives within the renewables associations, and I really do applaud the associations for the work that they're doing in building gender diversity. Under the renewables program, there is also an enhancement in women participation. The rules are created by government, the private sector coming to the party. So what does this all mean in terms of the outcomes of our research? One of the critical aspects is to create frameworks for renewables in Mpumalanga. How do we reverse the trend of the big fat zero in terms of renewables, wind and solar built in Mpumalanga today? And we'll come to a few specific suggestions in a minute. What are the levers to create clean energy policy for Mpumalanga? To create the sort of industrialization, manufacturing, and decent jobs that is so necessary in this area. And then what do we do on the skills development and gender inclusivity for this region? So taking 3 one by one. Frameworks for renewables in Mpumalanga need to include policies that enable renewables development in Mpumalanga. We need to empower and reward renewable projects for their proximity to load centers, and we need to make the most of the grid opportunities that are here. Eskom is doing profound work already. It was announced earlier today that by the end of June there will be an announcement of the successful bidders for the land, which of course is the closest proximity to those grid connection points. So it's already happening. It's actually not a new recommendation from us. We would like to have a discussion with the RPP office on the potential for regional procurement and reduction of the annual bill target. This might be done on a provincial basis. It might be done around nodes where the grid can actually accommodate it. Whatever the rules of procurement, PMFA can actually accommodate. So again, we don't have all the answers, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And obviously grid development. I was talking at our table earlier. I think not enough people realize the extent to which the investment in the grid is required, but also the enabling factor that grid development plays. It has to come before the generation facility construction. The second main area then is on industrial policy. A further coordinated approach to achieving localization and foster value creation. And I take note of the agreement between the Premier and Eskom previously today. Again, not a new recommendation from us, something that is already happening. I see it in other fields as well, but I think that is what needs to happen to an even greater extent. Diversification of local content. Let's understand the detail of what's already manufactured in Mpumalanga, in our towns, in Malakleni and Witbank. In Malakleni, Witbank, and what was Middleburg in the T20 area. And of course, it was mentioned before, the opportunity for dedicated special economic zones for manufacturing. In terms of skills development and gender inclusivity, renewable energy skills development programs are suggested to the TVET colleges. We engaged with 3 TVET colleges in Mpumalanga. We talked to Saratech. We created the link there. Saratech, of course, does training of artisans in a specialization, but their skill sets are what's required for the TVET colleges to develop courses and programs to take the lead in these sort of skills development programs. On the back of acknowledging skills that the staff already have, regardless of the formal education qualification levels. Recognition of prior learning is a known issue. We have the Department of Higher Education and the Co-Benefits Council as well. I've mentioned it before, childcare facilities. I'm a passionate father of 4 kids. But even an involved, passionate father, I understand, is very, very different from being a mother. And we need to love and honor our mothers and include them in what we do. And entrepreneurial development for women. Let's create women leaders in business. It's perhaps a great place to end off. It's been a great privilege today. The last slide shows you all the partners in the work, and it really has been a great privilege to be here today. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Brian and David. Dr. Jacobs is the founder of a global consultancy firm, and we heard his global perspective on how climate change impact is already presenting itself as a reality. We also heard how passionately he spoke about the way in which the planet is becoming less and less hospitable to us, precisely because of us. I also want to pause and say thank you, Brian, because what you managed to do was locate research, data, analysis in the context of people being at the center of the journey that we need to undertake. In your elaboration of analytical insights, you did not fail to locate people, jobs, women, the youth employment opportunities that will come as we undertake a journey that maximizes on the natural potential that presents itself. You also said, I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, that hope plus courage plus strategy gives us a future, in particular for the Mpumalanga region, to undertake this transformative journey that is not only necessary, but full of hope and potential to bring jobs, industry, as well as growth and prosperity to the region. Thank you very much. I would now like to call on